Hello, this is Dr. Stephanie D. Barnes, CEO of C-Suite Women's Network, where I help women and a few good men to be the CEOs of their lives so they can be better CEOs in their businesses. And I am happy to continue the series, Communicating Like a CEO, How to Engage and Not Enrage Your Team. In parts 1 through 3, we have talked about the literal communications that go on between you as the leader of your team and those who are part of the machine, if you will, that's going to get you to execution and get you to your goal. We've talked about how important it is to be mindful of how we speak to our team, how important it is to make sure that we actually speak to our team and that we don't engage in communication by silence, and then how important it is to be an active listener to our team. But today, I want to talk about communicating via meetings. Because I don't know about you, but I can't stand going to an inefficient meeting where we're talking about what we're going to talk about, and you get to the end and you don't even know what's going on. There was a 2014 Gallup survey that found that 46% of employees have attended a work meeting and left without knowing what to do next. That's almost 50% of the people there. Okay? So the thing is, if you're having a meeting and you're not getting things done and people leave your meeting without knowing what to do next, you've just had a very expensive get together. And if you're all about the business, you do not need to waste your time or other people's time with inefficient meetings. So I wanted to dedicate some time to helping you to make your meetings meaningful so that you're meeting for the purpose of getting things done and not meeting simply for the purpose of talking about what you're going to talk about and not really knowing what anybody is talking about or what's getting done. So the thing is, it's really important for any meeting to plan it. Make sure that there's a purpose for the meeting, and make sure that if all it is a little post-it note and you've written down the 3 things we're going to talk about, that you at least do that, because your meeting is as good as the planning that you put into it. So if you show up at the meeting, you don't have an agenda, you don't know what you want to talk about, you don't know what you don't want to talk about, you don't know what you want to do next, you are not being a good leader. You're wasting your time and you're wasting the time of your team. Bad meetings, bad for you. It doesn't maximize the talent, time, and energy of the participants that are there. Make sure that if you're going to have a meeting, you really think about who needs to be there. Is this a decision-making meeting? Have I thought about, are the decision makers even present? Are they on the phone? And this, what I'm talking about is for either an in-person meeting, a virtual meeting, or just a telephone conference. So for any time you're getting people together, you want to make sure that you're optimizing their time. So make sure you know who needs to be there. Think about what you're going to talk about, because that's how you'll determine who needs to get an invitation. And by all means, please cut out the courtesy invitations. Nobody just wants to be on the call just to be on the call. If it's a courtesy invitation, you just want to let people know you're meeting, let them know that this is a courtesy. You don't need to show up. All right, so let's get back to making the agenda. You know, when you don't come up with an agenda, when you don't plan a meeting, it communicates to your team that you don't care about them. You don't care about their time, that you're okay with being ineffective and inefficient, and it's okay for them to do it too. So remember, as a CEO, you set the tone. So prepare for the meeting by preparing the agenda. Make sure that you think about the logical sequence of the discussion. What do you want to discuss? What do you want to say for another meeting? Make sure that you get input from others on the agenda, because there may be some things you overlook. And then as you're doing that, you can, again, think about who needs to be there. Don't call a meeting and don't have the people who can actually effectuate your outcomes there, have them absent. Also be very clear about the meetings, because some meetings are action producing. At the end of the meeting, a decision is going to be made. At the end of the meeting, a project is going to be finished. It's action producing. But there are other meetings that's really are meetings for discussion, to just educate, to brainstorm. Because what you don't want to do is to have a person who's thinking you're coming to make a decision, and the meeting is intended for brainstorming, and that's it. And they walk out of the meeting angry because their expectations weren't met. So at the beginning of the meeting, establish, today this is not a decision-making meeting, or this is. Be very clear about that. Assign roles before the meeting. Make sure you always know who's a facilitator. Typically, that's going to be you as the leader. Have someone who's a scribe, who's going to take the notes, or who's going to, make sure that things are kept in order. Make sure you have a timekeeper, because as you set those agenda items, assign a time. Think about 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. This makes sure that, one, you've not set a 3-hour meeting for 1 hour's time, okay? And 2, it helps people to be efficient in their thoughts. So make sure that the timekeeper keeps time, and give them authority to say 1 minute left, time is up, okay? And then finally have somebody who's going to actually take notes in the form of minutes, so that you know what it is you've talked about and the actions that you've decided to take, and make sure that you state the desired outcome, and at the end of the meeting, you go back and revisit it to see, did you achieve it? And then the final thing that you do is that if there are action items, you're very clear. You're supposed to do this. This is what we're doing next, or we're not taking any action until we get back together. And again, at the end of that meeting, people will know. One of the things that I just want to end with saying, as the CEO, you set the tone for the meetings you have. Sometimes you need to set ground rules. What's acceptable, what's not. Explain the purpose of the meeting. Make sure everybody understands the agenda, kind of like all hearts and minds clear. You really need to have that moment, because that just increases the possibility of your meeting running efficiently, as well as you having harmony. They may not agree on everything, but at least the way the meeting is conducted is in accord. And one thing that's really important to do to keep your meetings on target is to run a parking lot for ideas that are not germane to the agenda, but are good ideas. Because, you always got that one person who comes in and they get off on a whole nother tangent. It's something great to talk about, but not during this meeting. So the way that you respect that idea, the way that you capture that, because it may be something that's important, but again, it's just not germane to the agenda. Let's run a parking lot, and I'm going to write that over here. That puts a pin in that thought. And then at the end of the meeting, if you have time to come back and address it, you can, but it doesn't allow them to just turn your meeting into this big brainstorming thing and get your agenda all off whack. And the greatest threat to any meeting is not necessarily conflict, but groupthink, where people are afraid to disagree, and so they want everybody to agree, and you seek unanimous consent, and you don't ever really get along. You don't ever really get the action moving along. So make sure that you don't fall victim to groupthink, that you truly invite dissension and conflict to be expressed, and then have a way for dealing with it, so that you don't fall victim to the tyranny of the minority, the 1 or 2 people who don't agree with anything, and they're always going to be on the dissenting side for the purpose of dissenting. And note to self, that may be some people that you don't want on your team, because they're not truly there for the dialogue. They have stuck in a position, and they're going to run your meeting amok to begin with. So anyway, that's just something that I wanted to share with you that's so important as a CEO, to run your meetings with efficiency. Plan them, come up with an agenda, make sure that the people who need to be there are there, make sure that you set expectations, make sure you're clear on the desired outcome, and at the end of every meeting, you actively discuss what's next. What are the action items next, so that everybody leaves that meeting very clear on what they need to do. So I hope that this has been helpful to you, and I look forward to concluding the 5-part series, Communicating Like a CEO, How to Engage and Not Enrage Your Team. Because as the Chief Executive Officer, in order to get things done, you've got to be the Chief Communications Officer. So this is Dr. Stephanie D. Barnes, and I look forward to catching you on part 5 when we conclude this series.